I don't know if you see behind me, but this is the truck bay. And it's where we keep our trucking trailer inside. Strange time to be doing a tour because our off season, typically we're taking everything apart, repainting it, cleaning it. So everything is kind of not really a mess, but kind of all taken apart. So I'll show you here. You look there, cabinet doors, replacing them. This is kind of that time of year where we get everything fixed up and ready for next year. Here's the 34. Here, I'll take you through.
I think we froze up there.
Completely rebuild one car. Here are our offices.
Hey, Michael, you lost. They're in a garage, so there's probably not very good service. He doesn't realize that.
Well, yeah, he lost service, so he can't hear you telling him that he lost service.
Michael. Sorry, guys.
Oh, now did we completely lose him? No, he's there.
You got me? Yeah.
We do now. We lost you while you were on the hauler.
Well, it looks like we don't have internet out there, so you guys are going to have to stick to the shop. Here are our surface plates. It's where we measure everything, get the cars ready, all the setup. You look behind me, you see a lot of race cars that are not ready to go. They're all getting rebuilt, new bodies, new chassis, new bars, new pieces. I don't know what I'm allowed and not allowed to show you, but we'll do a quick glance there. So that's
this looks just like what we have at the school.
Yeah, so that's what they look like when you tear them all apart. And that's what they look like when you get them back together. So all the guys are working right now. And like I said, this is the time of year where we tear everything apart, clean it, media blast it, paint it, start over, new nuts, bolts, pieces, body panels. So there's definitely a lot going on. But I'll take you back here to kind of the heavy fab area. Working on chassis, putting new bodies on. So like I said, a lot happening right now, but we got, 2 teams that we run out of here. We ran up to 3 teams. So kind of a big area. And right now it's a little bit, like I said, chaotic. So offices are up there. That window right there, that's where the management spies on you. Make sure that you're working all day long. And I don't know what I missed.
Hey, Michael, we have a question. John wants to know, how many cars do we prepare for a season?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I believe we're allowed to have, 8? Is that right? 8 certified in the cycle of things? 15. 15 in circle, whatever you want to call it, in the queue. It takes us about 4 weeks, I think, before we'll run a car again. So we'll race it, we'll take it apart, we'll fix anything that needs to be fixed, replace anything that needs to be replaced. But the time-consuming process is getting all the measurements and everything just right, so that the car is just as fast, if not faster, than the last time you ran it. Aerodynamics being so important that every panel and every piece of that body has to be just right. So takes 4 weeks, and then we can run that car again. And then we have some different cars, super speedways. Daytona, Talladega is a different car than what we'd run at a mile and a half or a short track. So but throughout the season we we'll run through, each car will probably use 2 to 3 times depending on the type of track that we go to. But yeah, so a lot of cars, a lot of bars, a lot of pieces for sure. All right. Anybody got any other questions before I slide over to the panel here?
Yeah, let's jump into the panel, and we've got some questions for them, and then we'll circle back with you.
So you want me just to come over here and then shut that off?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can kill it.
Okay, I'm gonna hop this one off here. Hold on 1 second.
Should be all good to go. Should be over
We're
here.
wearing a mask. We don't think 6 feet. True, right?
What?
We're wearing a mask. We don't.
Check, make sure they're all good. They can hear us.
You guys got us now?
Can you hear us? Yep.
We can hear everybody.
We're good.
I think the next we're going to ask the questions. You guys have the questions, right?
Yes, we do have the questions. So if maybe you want to do just a quick introduction of who we have on the panel. And I've got Nick Cometti and Nick Oblosny. There are Nick and Nick who do our little technical segments on our YouTube channel for our auto club. So if you want to run through, do a brief introduction so everybody knows who we have here, and then I'll let our guys start firing away with some questions.
Perfect. So you can see the guys sitting there. We have Rusty Davidson. Wave your hand, Rusty. Rusty is our tire specialist. This is his second year with us now. Next to him is Chris Urgis, who is our engineer on the 34 team. So this is also his second year with us. And then next to him is Drew Blickensderfer, who is our crew chief, who, if you guys are familiar with NASCAR, you see him on Race Hub all the time. You see him on TV. And then Michael sat down next to him. So you guys got your list of questions if you want to start asking them.
All right, let's go, Nick and Nick. Got them right behind me. So let's get started with some questions for Rusty.
All right. A few questions that the students at North have come up with is, I'll just go through them. The first one is, what is the role of a tire specialist, and why does a team need one?
So my role as a tire specialist, when I get to the track, I take in all the tires, gather all the data, and get it over to our engineer, Chris, who then helps sort them out, and I keep track and keep all our tires organized and ready whenever we might need them to practice, qualifying in the race.
Another question we had from those students was, what are your roles and responsibilities on the track and off the track as a tire specialist?
So the biggest role is making sure the tires are properly ready whenever it's time to put them on the car, whether, like I said, practice, qualifying, or during a race throughout the pit stops. Then throughout a run, whenever we change tires again, we'll gather the same data just from the post. And so that helps track handling, helps track wear, make sure we're not going to have any issues or not experiencing any issues throughout the race.
What do you do at the shop, Rusty?
Okay, that's a good question too. So at the shop, we only run one truck driver on a full time. So I help turn the truck and trailer around. So it's quick turnarounds every week. We race on Sunday, the hauler leaves again on Thursday. So it takes a day or so to turn it around and make sure it's ready to go from track to track, whether it's a short track, intermediate, speedway, road course. It takes different parts and pieces on the trailer in case we were to run into any issues and make sure we're properly prepared.
All right. Another question that some of us had was, how do you become a tire specialist, and is there any like special education or training that you need to go through?
So I grew up go-kart racing, and so I always enjoyed working with the tires. It's a little bit different, but as I moved to North Carolina and started working in racing, I didn't have any special training other than just hands-on and at the track and at the shop, just learning it from veterans that have been in the sport for years as well. And so it's just, repeat, step and repeat, step and repeat. And it's just hands-on learning. That's, like most things in racing, that's what it is. It's fairly simple as far as bolt-on components, and you just learn it throughout time.
Sorry, I was on mute there. I've got a question. These two are too afraid to ask, but is it true the driver has the cleanest gloves out of anybody on the team?
Cleanest gloves? Yeah, for sure. I don't work on anything greasy. So, Yeah, these guys, you look at their uniforms compared to mine, and I mean, they are rolling around in dirt and oil and grease all day long, and yeah, my stuff stays nice and clean.
Right. That's always the big joke, is that you can tell who the driver is when you look at the gloves, right? Sorry, just having a little fun there, taking a little cheap shot.
It's okay. They take cheap shots all the time too. Don't worry about it.
And we are having a little bit of an audio issue, guys, too. So that we're having a little bit of an echo on your side. So we're having a little bit of difficulty hearing. So I sent Mac a chat message. So just to let you know if he didn't get that.
One more time and see.
Is that better?
Yeah, it sounds better. And the next question we had has to do with the tires and the conditions. So it was, how do different conditions affect what type of tires you will use on the track?
That's a good question. So most of the time we have no choice. We run slick tires every week, everywhere. The only exception to that would be road courses in the rain. We have a groove tire we got to run this year at the Charlotte Roval. Other than that, Goodyear and NASCAR mandates the compound construction that you race, and that's the only option you have.
Weather sometimes will change it more than anything, though, based on air pressure and things like that. The stuff that we can control. NASCAR designates what type of tire we have to run. A Goodyear tire, and it's this model. And then depending on sunny, cool, hot, we can control the air pressure. That's one variable that we can change versus other teams that we kind of determine based off temperature and other things. Can adjust slightly, probably.
I think also too, to add to that, one of the things that's probably really challenging about NASCAR compared to other motorsports is just the amount of tires and different compounds and different constructions that we have from track to track. And so for Rusty, he could tell you how many different constructions there are and different compounds, but you know, you might go to Richmond and run, you know, these 4 tires, and then next weekend it's 4 different tires that take different pressures, different cambers, completely different construction. So it's a lot to manage.
Yeah, for 36 races, I believe we ran 19 different construction compounds in 2020. And it changes year to year. There's always testing and development from the Goodyear side to optimize performance from the team side.
Yeah.
All right. Another question that we had was, how are the NASCAR tires different than the tires that are like found on normal cars? Are they like stickier, more slick, or other options such as?
Yeah. So the main difference would be groove versus slick. Our tires are wider than your typical tires. They fit on a 15-inch wheel, so you'll see those on some OEMs. But we are not this year, but in the years to come, we're going to a 17-inch wheel with a short sidewall like you would see on an OEM, you know, Toyota Camry, Ford Mustang, and Chevrolet.
One hard thing about our tire, hard thing for us, is because we have a smaller wheel versus most racing series. Most racing series have a bigger wheel, smaller sidewall. We have a large flexible sidewall, and it is a radial tire like a street car, but it provides quite a bit of challenge trying to take a 3,500-pound vehicle and going 200 mile an hour around a corner with a large sidewall. That's not the easiest thing, which Goodyear produces a great tire for us to, you know, to make sure they don't have problems. They're in the market of selling tires on Monday, so they can't have a bunch of problems during a race on Sunday. So that leads us to having a fairly hard, not very pliable tire. So guys that have go-kart raced or short track raced, they're used to seeing tires that look like gumballs. Ours are quite a bit different than that.
The one thing I'll add about tires is that everything we do with the race car, whether it's suspension setup, whether it's aerodynamics, it's all in an effort to maximize that tire and that grip that the tire is creating. There's only about a contact patch about that big where the tire's in contact with the ground on all 4 corners. And there are thousands and thousands of pounds of force, both vertically and from the side, that are going through little small contact patches that are about that big. So everything we do is in an effort to maximize how much force those tires can produce, because that equals speed.
the last question we had for Rusty is, what advice do you have for someone wanting to get into the industry, and what is your most memorable moment from getting into this industry?
So my advice would be going to your local short tracks, coming, if you really want to be in NASCAR, is get into the Carolinas, finding a shop that'll, let you come in and get to working, getting your hands into it. But I mean, as you're young and growing up, it's going to local short tracks, late model racing, street stock racing, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, racing is racing, and they're all race cars. So just getting your hands on it, in it, learning, being willing to learn. And then my most memorable moment is winning, right? Anytime you go to victory lane, been a few years, but that's what we all are here to do, right? We are all competitors growing up and still today. So anytime you find victory lane, that's the best.
All right, so now we have some questions for Chris. One of the questions that North came up with was, have you always been interested in racing, or did engineering lead you to the racing?
Yeah, so pretty much racing came first. I got involved in middle school. A friend of my stepdad basically bought a racetrack that was about 30 minutes south of Green Bay, Wisconsin. And my first job ever was working the popcorn stand at that racetrack. Then he built a car with another friend. And the year after that, we built our own car. And the year after that, I started racing full time behind the seat. So that's pretty much about when I caught the bug. It was about sophomore year of high school, junior year of high school. And that's when I decided this is what I wanted to do for a career, and figured out that mechanical engineering was going to be the best way to break into the sport. So I chose engineering because of racing, and that kind of set my path as far as what schools I went to get here.
Chris, I've got one quick question. So you said that the schools you chose took you into the racing field, and there's a program called Formula SAE out there where the colleges build a race car and compete against other universities and colleges out there. Was that something that you did, or was that something you were looking for when you chose your engineering school?
Yeah, so I started off my first 3.5 years at the University of Wisconsin Platteville. I can't say I went there specifically off the start just because of the Formula SAE program. It was more of a distance from home and allowed me to still race on the weekends at that point. But I eventually knew I was going to transfer to UNC Charlotte, where there's a motorsports concentration in the engineering program. And they not only do Formula SAE, they do Mini Baja, they had a drag car, they had a Legends car, they had a bunch of different stuff, not to mention some better tech electives that were a little bit more vehicle based. You see similar programs at Clemson, University of Michigan's got a similar program. That there's a bunch of different schools that are very tied to OEM and automotive. So I knew Platteville wasn't going to be the best long-term solution for me, and for NASCAR specifically, you got to be in the area. So it made sense for me to transfer to UNC Charlotte, and I finished my degree out here.
Next question is also for Chris. As someone who is interested in engineering, how do I know what specific sector to go into?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the last part of that question?
As a person who's interested in engineering, how do I know which sector of engineering to go into?
Great. So, engineering is a very, very broad field, and you have everything from electrical engineering to mechanical engineering, aerospace engineering, software engineering, even. So, the best thing you can do is your undergraduate experience allows you to dabble in a bunch of different fields. So the best thing you can do is try to diversify your education, find out what interests you, and then get more specific, whether it's your other tech electives, whether you decide to go to graduate school, use your undergraduate experience to kind of figure out what kind of discipline and what industry you want to go into, and then focus on that.
All right, since you guys work both on the track and in the shop, what are the different tasks that you have that differentiate from like working in a shop compared to on the track?
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you back. Can you turn up I'm gonna have you repeat it. We got some some mechanics or some fabricators are using some air tools in the background, so it's a little hard to hear you guys at times. Can you repeat that, please?
Yeah. All right. So since you guys work in both the shop and the track, what differentiates the different tasks that you do on the shop versus the track?
So, I mean, everything we do in the shop is more or less in preparation for the track. You only get so much practice time. So you got to make sure you're prepared. You got to make sure any changes that you may want to go and move in, you're prepared to make those changes. And then at the track, sometimes you have things that you want to try. You might have big packages that you want to try that require whole different sets of springs, shocks, sway bars, stuff like that. And more or less, you're just trying to optimize the vehicle and optimize what you brought to the track to, put the best car out there that you can for the race. So everything we do in the shop is more or less, prep work and trying to put the best vehicle out there. And then at the track, you're trying to more or less optimize what you have. Because at that point, there's a lot of stuff you're limited. You can't go cutting off a body and put a new body at the racetrack, right? So you're trying to optimize what you brought to the track once you get there.
Another question I had is that you said that you got the racing bug when you were a sophomore in high school, and I was wondering how that changed as you got older and transitioned into more of the engineering side of racing.
I think you have a little bit more of an appreciation for the engineering. Like, our rules are very locked down, so we have to get the type of engineering that goes on is a little different than maybe what you would see in Formula One. While the base, even our base suspension is somewhat antiquated, it's like a 1960s truck arm suspension. The level of refinement that goes into these cars is unparalleled to any other form of motorsport. Even the engines, not necessarily right now, but a couple of years ago when we were still making the big horsepower, to have a pushrod V8 engine that would be able to last for 700 miles over the course of a weekend, and all the things that go into that. I mean, it was without question the most refined power plant on the planet. So, it may not always have all the bells and whistles and technology that you see in other forms of motorsport, but the level of refinement in NASCAR is second to none. So I think from an engineering perspective, definitely have more an appreciation for that. But as you grow in the sport, there's other things when you're young and you first get into it, it seems kind of glamorous and kind of really cool, but it's, as you get into it more, it is a tough lifestyle. You're on the road a lot. There's sacrifices you have to make. You miss life events, whether it's weddings, funerals, stuff like that. The sport does try to help out when and if they can, but there's a lot of sacrifice, and you got to really love what you do to be successful in the sport. So, those are all things that you don't necessarily know when you first get into racing, but then after you're involved with it, that you have to deal with.
Okay, we've got a question from one of our audience members, Will. He's in our auto program here at Naperville North. Go ahead, Will.
You were talking about the engine that you guys use, and I wanted to ask, since you guys are holding your engine in such a high rev range, what's the most common point of failure in those engines, like head gaskets or overheating?
It used to be the valve train.
Still is.
Still pretty much is the valve train. So you got a push rod engine, and NASCAR, I'm all familiar with camshafts and stuff, but NASCAR basically has a limit on the base circle. So that kind of limits how much lift you can do. It's a balance between lift and duration as far as the acceleration rates with all these materials. So we actually got to a point where they figured out how they could basically launch the valve off the face of the cam and catch it on the backside to kind of get around the rules. And making that live for 700 miles over the course of the weekend is a challenge. So those parts are very heavily stressed from the push rods, the valve springs, the valves, the seats, all that stuff. So I would say that's probably like when we overheat an engine, that's typically what fails is something in the valve train.
Yeah, we have special oils. All of us are usually on an oil manufacturer deal, and that oil manufacturer is producing different oils for us. 2 years ago, when we made 900 horsepower, we would go race the Coke 600. So it'd be 600 miles, 4 hours and some of racing. and our RPM range would be for that entire time between 7,200 and 9,200 RPMs for 4.5 hours. So zinging that thing at 9,200 RPMs with an engine that can run at 300 degrees water temperature, it takes a toll on the drivetrain or the valve train. And now that we have reduced horsepower, they put a tapered spacer on our car with 550 horsepower. Then the goal is, how light can you get the valve train to help with performance? So it's always a balancing act from our engine manufacturers to try to get one, obviously something that lasts, and two, something that's going to produce the most power. Going into our engine manufacturer, Roush Ace Engines, they have a room that's probably 20 by 20 that looks like you're walking into a CSI investigation room. And you can find the valve spring that Matt Kenseth in 2006 broke at Roush Racing in that room, and what manufacturer and what happened to it and how much it weighed and where they got it and what batch number. And if you see like a NASCAR race, if someone breaks a valve spring on a Sunday, that next week's engines are all coming out of cars because there's a good chance that batch number of valve springs are in the next car, and there was something wrong with the metal they used to wind them or something. So valve train is definitely high on the list of issues with engine builders.
From our perspective too, I mean, we push the engine. We want to run them hot because that allows us to run more tape on the grill, which is more aero. So it's always a balance between what we're trying to get from an aero side and vehicle performance side and making the engine live and not upsetting the engine shop.
All right, we're gonna move on to Drew now. A question that Northup came up with was, what was your path to NASCAR, and like who helped you and encouraged you to become what you are today?
So I'm from Illinois, by the way. I'm a Land of Lincoln boy. I'm from Central Illinois. I've got relatives in Bolingbrook and Darien, so I know your guys' neck of the woods. I grew up racing dirt tracks. My father was a stick and ball guy. He was a basketball coach in Central Illinois. Won a couple state championships, and so I was athletic minded growing up. My grandfather owned a service station, and my uncle raced cars. And although I played stick and ball sports, I got the bug. You know, like many junior high age kids, the driver's license not too far away. I want to go to the drag strip. I want to go to the dirt track. I want to go with my uncle. I want to hang around my grandfather's garage, things like that. So that bug stayed with me. I went to college and wrestled in college. And about halfway through college, I was like, what am I going to do for a living? What am I going to do? And NASCAR was always something that appealed to me. I wanted to be around race cars. I didn't want to drive them anymore. I did in Central Illinois, and I was done wanting to drive. I wanted to work on them. And to be honest, the crew chief thing is what I always wanted to do. It's so similar to being a head coach, and that's kind of ingrained in me that I'd say my uncle and my grandfather with the mechanic side, and my father with the coaching side. That kind of led me to want to be a crew chief and head south in 1999.
I also had a question for Drew. Mine was, how do you deal with the stress and anxiety that comes up during your job as you call shots during the race?
Well, there's a lot of ways, and I've learned now that I'm in my early 40s, I definitely deal with it better now probably than I did when I first got into the sport. I became a crew chief in 2006, and then a cup crew chief in 2009, and I didn't know how to handle it. To be honest, it was one of those situations where I got put in it, and it's like, how do you deal with the stress? And you know, as you're going through the sport and at your local track, and even at this level, the thing that excites me and part of the coaching, the part of the I feel like a coach more than anything on Sunday. I get to call the timeouts. I get to tell us when we're putting 4 tires on. I get to say pit, don't pit, do that. And that's the thrill of it, is trying to figure out, man, we're running 23rd. How are we going to finish 19th? You know, how are we going to get that first down? How are we going to get to the free throw line? How are we going to do these things that our coaches are thinking about? And that mentality kind of I thrive off of. That being said, you got to find a way kind of Monday through Thursday, Monday through Saturday to try to let some of that anxiety go, because you're pretty hyped up for 4 hours. Unlike most sports that are an hour and a half, 2 hours long, you're kind of on the edge of your seat for a lot of these races. You know, when you go to Daytona and Talladega, it's a little low key, but you're making some, what feels like at the time, pretty important decisions. So I find ways to try to burn off some energy on Monday through Saturday so that I'm refreshed for Sunday.
All right. Another question that we had was, how important is organization and accuracy? And also, what's the importance of communication and teamwork in racing?
Again, it's like any other job or sport that you're involved in. The leader has to kind of determine all of those things. And in areas that I'm not good at, surround yourself with guys that are. It's extremely important. When you go to the racetrack and when you're bad or when you're good, you got to know why, or have at least a good understanding why. We are probably take more out of racetracks that we're bad at than we're good at. And that comes from accuracy. When you set up the car on the setup plate, when you know what's going on with the car, that information is very valuable when you come back on Monday and debrief. And that all goes into accuracy of the guys that are checking the car, making sure the car is exactly the way we thought it was when it left the shop, got to the racetrack, raced. And then when it came home, a lot of times if we have a bad race, we'll put it back on the setup plate and go through it to make sure something didn't break, something didn't change, or that there wasn't a mistake made throughout the week leading up. And it was the actual car. Simulation and accuracy. Simulation that we run throughout the week is all determined on how accurate we are in both measuring parts, roamer arm in the car, making sure that everything is exactly where we need it. So the tighter the competition, the more important of accuracy. And that definitely at this level is extremely important.
All right, I've got a question from one of the other teachers here. And this is a good question. So what happens if the driver and crew chief don't get along? And how do you make sure that you've got a good relationship with the driver and crew chief? Is it something where in the, when you're putting a team together, do the two sit down? Is there an interview process to make sure that there's good chemistry in the team and everybody gels? Or maybe you could expand on that a little bit.
You don't want both of us to answer that.
At least sitting this close together. No, there is definitely the driver crew chief relationship. Kind of like we're the two leaders on the team, and everybody kind of takes direction off of our thought and how we act and our emotions. So the relationship between the driver and the crew chief, whenever I've been in this situation before, when another driver has talked to me or when another crew chief has talked to Michael, you talk to them, you try to figure out if you're going to gel. You look at famous driver crew chief pairings in our series, and they worked it out for a reason. And a lot of times that is at the end of the day on Sunday, if we get mad at each other during the race, we want a better result. And that's something that Michael and I have worked out really well. We know that we're fighting for the same thing. If I'm mad at Michael or Michael's mad at me, I'm okay with that. And he's okay vice versa, I think. And because we know our Monday is going to be better if we figure it out and we're pushing towards the same direction. So yeah, that relationship, just like, again, another sports analogy, Bill Belichick, Tom Brady, that relationship was really good for a lot of years. They have to, the driver and the crew chief is a lot like a quarterback and a football head coach. We have to get along. We have to understand what the goal is and help each other push towards it.
All right. Question that we had was, it's a kind of random question that we had for you guys was, have you ever used one of your wrestling moves against the other teams?
I would say it really wasn't a move. I've been put in a position one time where I had to stand up, but again, I was standing up for Michael on the team. So yeah, but I try to not do that. Like I said, I'm over 40 now. So that was way in my past.
We'll send you a link so you can watch it.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. And yes, it worked very successfully. And yeah, point was taken by the other.
My last question for Drew would be, what is your philosophy on leadership and the importance of delegation?
I'm kind of a hands-off guy in the mode of like, I let the guys do their deal. I try to hire people that are qualified and let them run with what they have. But also, you know, as a leader, the philosophy is the buck stops with you. If it doesn't go well on Sunday, it's not somebody underneath me's fault. It's my fault. Like you got to take responsibility for that. So I think my leadership style is I hire people that can do the job and let them do what they have to do. The tire guy, he takes care of tires. Engineers, they take care of simulation, things like that. My car chief, he takes care of his deal. And my job is to kind of oversee it all. And if I am head deep into tires, I'm forgetting something else. And if I'm head deep into helping set the camber on the race car on a Wednesday afternoon, there's a part of my job I'm not doing. And part of the job of being a crew chief is dealing with stuff besides the nut and bolts of race cars too. Every now and then you have a money element involved. How much money does that spend? How much performance is involved in that? There's a type of it, like all management positions, where you cross over. You're not just tightening wrenches left, you know, day in and day out. You're trying to figure out other things, or being pulled in other directions as well. So I think the strong part of leadership is surrounding yourself with people that kind of can take up either slack that I can't have part of, or the parts that I'm not good at. I am not the best organizer and note taker. I have to surround myself with people that are. And I think that's what I've learned. At 30, when I became a leader and a crew chief, I didn't know that as well as I do at 43. So I think I've learned that about myself through both winning and losing throughout my career. And like I said, when we run bad, you probably learn more from it. And I've learned that I need to have those kind of people around you.
Okay, we got a question from the audience here, and the question was, what is the communication flow to Michael while racing? Is the spotter the only one speaking with Michael? Can the crew chief speak directly to him during the race? And for those who don't know the role of the spotter, could you tell us what the spotter does?
Yeah. So when the race starts, Michael's got his helmet on. He's got a radio, and by NASCAR rules, he's got one analog radio that can basically speak to the team. We got a designated channel. Anybody in the grandstands, anybody at home can listen to that channel, but that's the only one Michael can speak on and can hear. Myself and the rest of the team on pit road, we have a few different radios. We have a digital radio that nobody can break in and hack, so we can talk back and forth about things we don't want competitors or fans to hear. That usually gets a little animated during the race. We have a channel 2. So Michael is on channel 1. We have a channel 2 where I can talk to the spotter. And what that is, I can relate to the spotter and Michael can't hear it, and vice versa. And then myself and the spotter can talk to Michael. And what we have is a spotter. He stands on top of the grandstands, and basically the spotter's primary goal is to keep Michael safe. Tell him when the caution comes out. If we're passing a car, tell him when he's clear, he's past him or he's not. When someone's passing us, they're there and they're not. When we speedway race, Daytona and Talladega, they're very, very beneficial in trying to help Michael determine what line to go in, because you're all bunched up in a big pack. So the spotter does a lot of that, but I can talk to Michael during the race. And most of the time, my communication to Michael is because I have some live data and can see him versus other guys, what the leader's doing versus us, or what the guy behind us or in front of us is doing versus us. And I try to relay to him things that are going to help us either stay ahead of the guy behind us or catch the guy in front of us. And that's kind of, in a nutshell, the Cliff Note version of it. The leader's doing this, but all in that is maybe that'll help you get the guy ahead of us, because that's ultimately the goal, right? No matter what spot you're running, how do you get the guy in front of you? So both line and throttle and brake and steering wheel related, I try to relay to Michael that information. And then obviously we're going to pit now, we're going to do this. And he's telling me the whole time the car is doing this or that. And I'm trying to relate with him through Chris. What are we going to do to try to fix that?
All right, we're going to move on to Michael now.
And hold on one second, Nick, before we do that. We can barely hear the guys on the end. So is there a way maybe Michael and Drew, if we could flip or something like that? Rusty, we can barely hear you when Michael has talked. We could barely hear on his side. So, oh, there we go. There's a microphone there. That's why.
You got 2 mics. So
How's that?
Oh, gotcha. Okay, that's it. There it is.
The seat's
All right.
warm.
I've got one particular student here that has a real interest in driving race cars. Nico, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead and ask Michael McDowell what you want to ask him.
Like how did you become a driver? Like where did you start?
Yeah, so I started. I really started racing from the time I was 3, 4 years old. I started racing BMX bikes, and then I raced dirt bikes and quads. I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, on the West Coast, and so a lot of desert racing, things like that. But I think it really started for me when I was 8 years old, and I started racing go-karts at my local track in Phoenix. And you know, just like anything, any new sport or any new thing that you do, it just kind of started out small, and it kind of grew from there. And you know, you just start out small. And once I got to the point where I was winning races at my local track, we started, you know, traveling to different racetracks in California and Nevada, and racing regionally and then nationally and then internationally. And it just kind of grew on its own.
So you started with karting, right?
Karting, yep.
Yeah, all right. Like how do you like handle the actual like car in the track? Like do you like do some simulation out of the like racing weekends?
Yeah, so I do simulation. We have, you know, with our manufacturer, with Ford, they have a R&D center here in Concord, and they have 2 simulators. And so typically, not every week, but probably every other week, I'm on the simulator. But as far as, you know, for me personally, in the training and all that, you know, it's all the years that led up to this point of experience that gets you prepared. Without practice and without testing, you know, the simulation is important. But, you know, it's the simulation, when people think about it, you know, I sometimes think that they think it's for the driver, and there's so much more going on that I do benefit from it. But if it was just for me and I got to go make laps and try different things, it would be more beneficial for me. But normally we're, you know, developing parts and pieces and setups and working through a laundry list of things. So I have to be very consistent and not make a lot of changes myself or try new things, because that'll mess up sort of the testing plan. So it's definitely difficult right now to try new things that, you know, other than on race day. I mean, one of the things that is good about our sport, though, is that the races are long. You know, they're usually 3-4 hours. And there's usually a point in the race where you have a little bit of room out front, you have a little room out back that you can try new techniques, you know, try new lines, try to manipulate the cars in different ways to try to get more speed out. And like Drew was talking about, that's some of the information that he's relaying to me. And as I'm trying new things or different things, he's letting me know if that looks better or not.
And to add on that, you know, there's some tools out there now that like none of us had when we were your age, like iRacing, where it's a very, you know, affordable and to some degree fairly realistic sim. You know, if obviously you don't have all the forces and feelings, and even to the degree that we can replicate on our manufacturer sim, because it's, you know, a multi-million-dollar sim. But as far as, you know, how to race cleanly, hand-eye coordination, all those types of things, you know, iRacing definitely provides like a really big benefit and stuff like that. And obviously, you know, William Byron came up through that, and a few other drivers have come up, you know, working hard at iRacing. So
that's definitely an important aspect for learning new tracks and just having those visual references and just getting familiar with tracks. When I transitioned from sports cars to stock cars, I spent a lot of time on, you know, different racing platforms, learning the tracks, just trying to gather as much, you know, info as I could on just lift points and what to look for. And, you know, this tree's here and this wall breaks here and this sign's there. And you just try to gather as much, you know, information as you can.
Another question was, like, did you like get into like a racing team right away, or did like sponsor like took you to NASCAR? Like how?
Yeah, so the transition from go-karts to, you know, professional racing for me, you know, I started out from go-karts to formula cars, and I was fortunate to get a scholarship through Mazda. They have a program back then, it was called Road to Indy. and I was able to win the Mazda scholarship, through my previous, race results and experience, and then graduate from that and keep moving and progressing in my career. So I was very fortunate because I didn't have a lot of money and didn't have a lot of sponsorship, but I, was fortunate to get that Mazda scholarship, and that really propelled my career. Allowed me to race, on a national stage, on TV, and win races and win that championship, and that gave me the opportunity to keep advancing. And that's the hard part with our sport is, all sports are challenging, and at the top level, everything has to go just right for you to have that opportunity. But even more so in motorsports, because without sponsorship, without financial backing, it doesn't matter how talented you are. It's hard to break into that next level. And so you need a car owner, whether that's your local short track, or, a car owner in NASCAR to give you that opportunity. And, but it always, requires, dollars to race. And, that's the tricky part with motorsports for sure.
And
Okay, we've got one question here from one of our faculty members. Melissa Skroba wants to know, are you allowed to listen to music during the race? And then also we had a question from the students as to if you have some type of pre-race playlist to get you kind of pumped up and psyched up for the race.
Yeah, so no on both of those. So one is that I've never been a fighter pilot, but I kind of relate racing cars to that. Is it requires 100% of your focus and attention, and there's never a time where you feel like, oh man, I could be listening to some tunes right now and kind of zone out. You're so locked in and engaged on what you're doing, and you're listening to everything. You're listening to the engine, you're listening to the tone of the engine, the distance between where you are and the wall, the tires. You're constantly have all this information that you have to process, and one of the ways that you're able to process it is by hearing. So no, I've never had any music playing in the background. I've had a couple unruly race fans jump on our channel before, but that's about it. And then as far as getting pumped up, unlike like stick and ball sports where you go out and you warm up and you throw the ball around or you shoot some hoops or you do whatever you do, typically we are doing appearances, meeting with people, going to drivers meetings, doing all these things, and then we just get in and go. So there's never that time where you have like 20 or 30 minutes to kind of build up, and really you don't need to. So for me, it's when I strap the belts on and I click everything in, that's like game time, and you kind of turn the switch and get ready to go.
All right, a question we had was, what kind of commitment did you do to get into racing, such as like different sacrifices, leaving people behind, or like quitting jobs and things like that?
Yeah, I think it's hard to explain that part of it, because when you say it took everything, people don't know what that means. Like they don't fathom what that means. The amount of commitment that it takes to make it to this level is probably different for everybody, but for me, it was a sacrifice of everything. Never been to a school dance, didn't go to high school, didn't go to prom, never been to a party. Literally every single weekend of my life has been spent at a racetrack. It's all I've ever done. It's all I ever wanted to do. So all those extra things didn't exist in my world. And so the commitment and the sacrifice was, for me, it was worth it. I'd do it again 100 times over. I mean, it's what I always wanted to do. It's what I've dreamed to do. But the level of commitment it takes is that this is the only thing you do, and it's the only thing that matters. And that's really hard now and then, especially early when you're your guys' age, and it's hard to fathom. The chances of me making it was so slim. To give all that up and not make it was, something that you thought about for sure, but you were willing to take the chance.
So now that you've talked about what commitment it takes to get into NASCAR, what would be your favorite part of NASCAR, either the adrenaline of racing, wanting to win, or even building the community of NASCAR?
Yeah, I think that, you know, the adrenaline that you get behind the race car is you can't replace it. And even in the off season, I'll go through these a little bit of emotional roller coasters because I'm so used to that adrenaline high every weekend, and now you're not getting it. And so that part of it, not that you kind of take it for granted, but it's definitely an element that, you know, over time, I think becomes not as important. But I have just enjoyed the whole process, the aspect of community, the aspect of building a race team and having those group of guys. And, you know, that part of it is just as fun now as driving the race car. But it's all about the challenge. You know, the fact that I haven't won a cup race is what keeps me going. It's what drives me still. It's that passion to achieve something that I haven't achieved, or to make it count. And so you've come so far that you don't want to give up, and you don't take it for granted.
All right, I've got another question here, Michael. This one's coming actually from carparts.com, your sponsor. They want to know, how has the introduction of racing and stages a few years back affected your pit strategy and affected your race strategy?
Yeah, so that's probably a twofer question, because that's part Drew's answer. But for me, the stages have been great because it's giving you a definite, on this lap, you got to get to, whether that's staying on the lead lap, whether that's holding the car off, whatever it might be. And it gives you more opportunities to work on your car, where, you know, before we had the stage breaks, the first half of a race might go green, and you don't want to make big changes, and you don't want to lose time on pit road, and your race kind of feels over if you're having a bad day that first third. Where now it feels like you get a couple opportunities to work on it, to gain some track position, to do some strategy. I think it's probably limited the crew chiefs on the strategy, just knowing that you're going to have the breaks. But I'll let Drew talk about that more so than anything. I just remember in past, you know, there used to be so much more going on with strategy than now.
Yeah, I think it can do both. I think it's good for fans to have guaranteed breaks. They know at lap 100 and lap 200, there's going to be a guaranteed stop, right? And we get to reshuffle it. But from a crew chief side, there's always strategy involved with when you're going to pit, if it stays green. If there's a break there or not, it just changes it. I know I have to get to lap 100, so that means, do we pit at lap 50 or do we pit at lap 65, depending on what's going on. So there's always a strategy part of it, but it's definitely changed the game, because now these breaks aren't just cautions. They're cautions that have points involved. And when there's points involved, it ramps it up. And I think it makes the race car driver and the teams go harder in the first 100 laps of a race than they would have in the past.
All right, a question that we had was, what is your like personal car? Is it like a fast car, or like, yeah, whatever?
Okay, repeat that again.
What is like your personal car? Is it like a fast sporty?
Oh, yeah, you guys are gonna be so disappointed. There's a lot of cool race car drivers out there that have like a collection of awesome cars, and, you know, Ferraris and Mercedes and Audis, and, you know, cool Ford Mustangs and GTRs and all that fun stuff. But I have a F-250 truck, and it's really cool. It's nice, but it's not winning any drag races, I can tell you that much. Yeah, so I haven't had a collection of cool cars or things like that, but I have a really fast shifter cart at the go-kart track, so that's where I get my speed fix from.
Now, quick question on that too. Do you ever forget to use your horn and just kind of bump the person in front of you, or Do you remember to use your horn and turn signals on the street?
Yeah, I did that once. It's probably 20 years ago. Some guy was sitting at a light and wasn't going, and I don't know why I thought that would be a good idea. Instead of honking, I just gave him a tiny little tap. But problem is that his trailer hitch went through my 1988 Nissan Maxima radiator. So I had to go on carparts.com and order a new radiator.
My last question for Michael would be that I've already asked you about your favorite part about being a professional driver. Now, what is your least favorite part of driving NASCAR?
I don't think a lot about that just because it's such a cool opportunity that I have and not something I take for granted. But I'd say the most challenging part of it is just not. We talked about commitment is just the sacrifice it takes for my family to do this. So that's probably the hardest thing is just knowing that, while I'm out there racing, I'm not watching my kids play sports or do any of those other activities that happen on weekends because I'm, obviously got my own sport that I'm doing. So there's times where it feels a bit selfish, but it's my job and it's what I do to provide for my family. And so it's part of it.
Okay, we've got an audience question real quick, Michael. Will, from the Auto Tech class, he's got a question for you.
This is more directed towards the entire team. What do you guys think is going to be the next big advancement in NASCAR, whether that be overhead cam engines or forced induction or new tire technology or something like that?
Yeah, I think we know there in the pipeline is the next gen cars that they're calling it. It's going to have, independent rear suspension, which will be a big change for us. But we also know in 2022 that the engine is going to change and there might even be a electrical element to it as well. So there's definitely things in the works that are going to be big advancements in the technology, space. And then also for NASCAR too, because it's no secret, like Chris talked about, our cars and engines and parts and pieces are, the technology that we use to refine those and make them what they are is incredible. But the actual parts and pieces themselves are very ancient. And so, this new car and these new technology coming to us will definitely help us get closer to where other motorsports are at.
This question might go back to Chris here, Michael, but so in our school, we have an auto program, we have an engineering program. So our students are learning different CAD programs, they're learning to 3D print, they're learning CNC. We've got a bunch of students in robotics. How much of the stuff that do you do in-house where you design? Obviously, some of the stuff comes from the manufacturer, some of the stuff has probably been around for a long time, but how much manufacturing do you do? And how do you do anything in-house, or how does the car get made?
Yeah. So, personally, I don't deal much on the design side. I'm more on the simulation side, but as NASCAR has progressed, basically every team is more or less making their own parts from bumper to bumper on these cars. And that's an effort, for proprietary reasons. You can't beat a guy that's running the same stuff that you are. So that's also one of the reasons why it's driven the cost to operate these cars way up, because every team is designing and building their own lower control arms, their own truck arms, rear end housings. So that's one of the big things that's going to happen with the new car is a lot of that's going to go away. You're basically going to get your parts, you're going to get your suspension pieces, more or less, you're going to buy them from NASCAR. And so it's going to take, hopefully, the plan is to take a lot of that development away, which is going to save the teams a lot of money and make the sport more viable going into the future. So right now, it's pretty much everything from bumper to bumper is designed by the team specifically for their car. But that's going to change over the next couple of years.
Excellent. There's another audience question here, and it had to do with the paint schemes of the cars. So the question is, are all 15 of the cars the same, or are they painted different, or how, I guess, if you want to explain maybe how paint schemes are chosen, and how maybe different tracks that have different paint schemes and why.
Yeah. That's more of a Ginny department. Paint schemes are Ginny's department. But from the mechanical aspect of it is all the cars are just basically primer, and then they'll take a wrap. And so depending on the partner for that weekend, it's not track specific, as far as what kind of wrap or what sponsor's going on it. But if Love's wants these 18 races, we'll just peel that wrap off of that car and run a carparts.com the next week and put a new wrap on it. And so it's, from our standpoint, there's no paint as far as that process goes. It's just a vinyl wrap. But as far as the designs and the approval and how all that gets done, that's Jenny's area of expertise.
Excellent. Here's a technical question. This is a good one. This one came in from carparts.com. So how much of the manufacturer goals, I guess basically what we're looking at is what kind of overlap is there between the NASCAR Mustang and the Ford Mustang that I would go into the Ford dealer locally and buy on the street? So is there any overlap in technology? Is there anything that they learn from a street car that goes to NASCAR, anything from a NASCAR that goes to a street car?
They both have a V8 engine.
That's it.
I think when it comes to technology, the manufacturers are always learning from motorsports.
Yep.
And vice versa. But as far as like parts and pieces that you would look on the Ford Mustang and you would look at my Ford Mustang, there's not a lot that you're going to say those are the same pieces. But as far as, things like fuel mileage, in racing, fuel mileage is obviously very important. And on the street car, it's the same. So there's technology and there's information going back and forth all the time. But it's hard to find parts and pieces on a street Mustang that are on our Mustang.
Parts and pieces, no, but from a technology standpoint, so things like wind tunnel development, like building those wind tunnels, like a lot of those things stemmed in motorsports and then get translated to the OEM world. Things like there's something called a KNC rig, kinemax and compliance, where they can actually lock a car down and put lateral load into a car and measure all the deflections and how everything bends and moves. That is something that originated in motorsports, but has now been translated into OEM worlds when they do development for bushings, for suspensions and stuff like that. Even the simulators, what the goals of a street car are very different than a race car, obviously, but a lot of the technologies to get to the answers that are relative for each field, they share those same technologies, whether it's simulation, whether it's data acquisition, engine dynos, the end goals are different, but the tools are the same.
All right, guys, let's see if anybody's got any wrap-up questions here. We do appreciate everybody's time, and I appreciate everything you've done for us today. So let's see if anybody here, if any of our students have any questions or anything that they want to ask the panel. We covered a lot today. Okay, it doesn't look like we've got any additional questions.
I have another question. Sorry.
Okay, another question. Here we go.
Where do you get your engines from, and who builds them?
So our engines come from right down the street, Roush Yates Engines. And so Roush Yates Engines is the only manufacturer that is building NASCAR engines for Ford Motor Company. And so Ford Performance only has the one engine manufacturer of Roush Yates, unlike GM that has Hendrick Motorsports and Childress or ECR. In the Ford camp, there's only one engine supplier, and that's Roush Yates.
And as far as homologations go, how how aggressive is the restrictor plate, et cetera? And you were mentioning camber earlier, like how important is camber and all that kind of stuff.
So from a homologation standpoint, that's actually something that's kind of ramped up a little bit, because with the development of the new car, NASCAR did not want teams to go continue pouring dollars into development and spent suspensions and stuff like that. So just about a year and a half ago, they kind of put a freeze on a lot of development. So you kind of had to submit, here's, we're going to have, 4 truck arm choices that we can run this year. And that's it. That's all you get. So you had to submit all those to NASCAR. NASCAR could at any time, more or less, check what you have in the car and make sure it's within spec to what you submitted to them before they homologated everything. So that's obviously going to get tighter and tighter and tighter as we go. But as far as, when we make those choices, we make sure that we can still get to all the other vehicle settings that we need to get to so we can maximize the camber. Usually more camber gives you more lateral grip, but it also increases wear. So there's a balance there that you need to try and make sure that the tire is going to live through an entire fuel run. So when we design a chassis, design suspension, we got to make sure that we can get to all the settings that we need to be able to get for the different tracks, because every track has its own characteristics, its own geometry, its own little quirks that you have to revolve around.
All right. Any other follow-up questions? Okay, I think we've got it here, guys. Again, appreciate your time and appreciate you taking a little bit of time out of our day to work with our students. I know they all appreciate it.
Yeah, and to double on that, hey guys, this is Sasha from carparts.com, just on behalf of carparts.com and everybody here. Obviously, huge thank you to Front Row Motorsports and everybody for you guys taking the time to be able to do this with us. And obviously, Greg and everybody at Naperville, thank you guys so much. And we hope you found this really informational. And we're excited to continue working with you guys throughout the school year.